When Messiah was being executed, he uttered 7 phrases, commonly known as the 7 words. What we're going to do today is look at the fourth word that he said, "Why have you forsaken me?" The famous last words of the Messiah. So this reading comes from the book of Matthew, chapter 27, verse 46, which says, Yeshua cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is, my God, why have you abandoned me? Now, as the sacrifices continued in the temple courts, accompanied by the glad sound of the Levites singing the Hallel, our Master Yeshua cried out the words of the psalmist, my God, why have you forsaken me?" This reading comes from Psalms 22, verse 2, which says, A psalm of David, my God, why have you forsaken me? Far from my deliverance are the words of my groaning. Now, both Matthew and Mark offer Greek transliterations for the Master's cry. The transliterations help dramatize the pinnacle moment and draw the reader closer into the moment. So here in Matthew 27, verse 46, it says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. In Mark 15:34, it says, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. So scholars debate over the precise form of the original Semitic that lies behind the transliterations. Now, most agree that the transliterations represent Aramaic and not the Hebrew. The Hebrew of Psalms 22:2 would translate as Eli, Eli, lama ahazatani. So Matthew's version sounds closer to the Hebrew than Mark's, and it may have been a Hebrew Aramaic mixture, but the Greek sabachthani cannot possibly intend to translate the Hebrew azatani. The Aramaic word sabachthani means abandoned me. Now, some scholars object to the idea of Yeshua quoting the Psalms in Aramaic rather than in Hebrew. But Aramaic was the common tongue of the Galilean and Judea. Now, certainly Yeshua knew the scriptures in Hebrew, but there is no reason to suppose he did not feel free to quote them in Aramaic. Now, Liechtenstein, commentary on the New Testament on Matthew 24:46 says, quote, the Tanakh was in the hand of the general public in the Aramaic language, and the public in general spoke Aramaic and Syriac mixed with Hebrew, as it appears in the Talmud, B. Nadirim 66b, also in B. Shabbat 41a, and B. Soda 49b. Now, in Matthew and Mark, these are the last words of Yeshua before death. The utterance has perplexed theologians for centuries. In what sense did God abandon the Master on his cross? Now, most theologians fight against the plain and obvious meaning. In the torment and of his suffering, our Master felt abandoned by God. Now, theologians generally struggle with the simple explanation because their particular Christology forbids such an interpretation, but the Semantic represents nothing more scandalous than the Master's prayer in Gethsemane that, if possible, the Father might take the cup of suffering away from him. Now, some suggest that Yeshua quoted the words of Psalms 22:2 in order to allude to the entire psalm, as demonstrated as previously demonstrated. Psalms 22 contains several passages about the crucifixion. Now, perhaps Yeshua only meant to invoke the whole text and did not mean to imply any sense of abandonment by God. The Master often quoted a passage from the Tanakh with the expectation that his listeners would know the broader context of the passage and draw additional implications from that context. But in each of those instances, the passage he quotes is directly pertinent and applicable to the situation. It seems unreasonable to claim that although Yeshua quoted these words in his last breath, he did not mean them. He only meant to use them as a reference point, invoking some interesting messianic prophecies. Now, that interpretation seems to trivialize the most dramatic moment in the entire story of Yeshua by making it into a biblical cross reference. Now, a narrative perspective will find it far more satisfying to emphasize that the real humanity of Jesus of Nazareth, who felt utterly alone in the world as he entered the last few moments of death. His vision of the Father, which had guided him in the past, dimmed it before his eyes. The Holy Spirit, who anointed him without measure since the Jordan, seemed suddenly without potency. Even the most saintly human beings must at times feel some similar separation and absence of the divine. If the Master's divine nature made him unable to share that experience with us, then he was not human. Just as we should not allow our theological assumptions to prevent Yeshua from experiencing a sense of alienation and abandonment from the Father, neither should we let his cry from the cross play too heavy role in shaping our theology of his relationship in the divine nature. Neither Matthew nor Mark present the utterance as proof for the theological construction. Instead, they use the utterance to demonstrate the Master's loyalty to God, even in the midst of the bewilderment of a human anguish. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the fourth saying or word. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, share, subscribe.